Thank you all for having me. My name is John Wathen. I'm a part of the Waterkeeper Alliance. We're an international federation of groups around the world that believe that clean water is a human right. We all have a right to clean water. We all have a right to go and catch fish from that water and not have to worry about what toxins are in the flesh of that fish that can harm us or our children. Those rights have been stolen from us around the world. That's why Waterkeepers exist today, to champion the rights for clean water for everyone. I'm a photojournalist from America. I was sent to the Gulf of Mexico. I work for the Waterkeeper magazine. I was sent there to collect evidence and data so that we could get an accurate picture of what was actually going on out there in the Gulf. I didn't arrive while the fires were burning. I got there a few days later. So what I'm going to tell you about is the beginning of a horror story for the Gulf of Mexico that may go on for the next 50 years. There's no way of knowing how long this is going to take place because we're just now beginning to experience some of the real negative impacts of the Deepwater Horizon. Anadarko, it was a sister company of BP. When I talk about BP, make that connection because they are. They were 25% owners in this rig that blew up. It was their cowboy mentality that caused this. It could have been prevented. It should have been prevented. And because of what you see in that picture right there, 11 men didn't go home. 11 fathers, 11 cousins, 11 brothers were lost at sea because of this disaster, and it was nothing more than greed-driven. This is what the Gulf of Mexico looked like when I got there. At this point, the well was still flowing free. When I flew over it for the first time in my life, I used the words hopeless. I've always been a person who thought that we could overcome if we just worked together, but in this case, it was hopeless. We were not going to stop this from coming on our shores. This well ran completely uncontained for 87 days because we didn't have a plan. The only plan that BP had was to drill for oil. Our contingency plan for a disaster was a knee-jerk plan. Let's try this. If it don't work, let's try this. Do something, even if it's wrong. That was our plan. And you have a plan here in New Zealand that's even worse than that. You're not ready for what's going to happen to you if there's a disaster such as what we experienced in the Gulf of Mexico. What you see up here, I'll give my little pointer, in this far corner of the screen, those specks up there, those are not just dust specks, those are ships on the horizon. Those are big vessels that were put out there to contain this oil spill, and we failed miserably. You don't have any such vehicles here. This is a processing boat. The two on this side are trawlers, and they're pulling a long boom between each boat that funnels the oil into this processor where it's supposed to remove the oil and let the water come out the back of the boat cleaner than what it was when it went in. But if you look, you see a trail leaving the boat that's just as dirty as any of this out here. It failed. This is the most readily available technology out there, and it was a complete disaster. What these guys are doing is collecting this oil into pools that are just about the same size as a city block here in Wellington. Then they fire a flare into it and they set it on fire. This is a picture of the fires. We actually flew the airplane under the smoke columns and shot back up into the sun, and it completely obliterated the sun. These fires, the fires themselves, were as much as 4 to 5 stories high. The smoke cloud went 4,500 feet in the air. We followed it with an airplane. We followed this all the way back to the state of Florida, 150 miles from the disaster site. We were still seeing black smoke in the cloud. There was so much oil on the surface, and the heat from these fires was generating its own weather pattern. At this point, the rain that was coming from the Gulf of Mexico is going all over the southeastern United States, and it was causing acid rain that actually killed a lot of our crops. This is a sad picture. This is a pod of dolphins. That's dolphins all in here. Every one of these holes that you see or where they've come to the surface to take a breath of air. Anytime you see oil with this rainbow color on it, it's off-gassing. It's giving off toxic fumes that would be comparison to you or I sticking our head into a gasoline tank and trying to breathe it. And yet the dolphins, they were in there. They had no choice. They died. The fires I showed you, when they collected those booms up full of oil, if there were sea turtles, birds, dolphins, whales, whatever was collected in those booms was burned at sea. On this day, I saw and photographed over 100 dolphins that were either dead, dying, or in extreme distress. They were flipping around on top of the water like a minnow in a bucket with no oxygen in the water. We don't know exactly how many died because we don't know exactly how many were burned at sea. This whale is swimming into the rainbow sheen. And again, as long as you see the rainbow, this stuff is off-gassing. It's causing toxic vapors where this whale has to breathe. The day that this was taken, when that whale came to the surface and he breached to blow and to breathe, there was blood down his back. This whale was hemorrhaging at the time the photograph was taken. This is what the surface looked like during that time. And once again, these are very large ships on the horizon. These are not tiny little boats. We had boats of that description, probably as many as 200 working at one time. There were thousands, counting our shrimp fleet, our trawlers, that were pulling booms around in the water, trying to collect this stuff up with no place to dispose of it. This boat right in the middle, if you'll notice, there's a patch of more clear water right around in this area. That's where the Corexit was being administered. Corexit, once again, is a dispersing agent that is used to hide the oil. It doesn't clean it up. Don't let them come here and tell you that Corexit will fix it. Corexit simply hides it. Out of sight, out of mind, the penalty is negotiable. The drill plan that I've seen here is even more insane. This is without a doubt one of the most insane drill plans I've ever seen in my life. The waters in the Gulf of Mexico are much calmer than what you have here. It's not as deep. The waters here are much colder. This is a recipe for disaster if it's allowed to go on here. I can't say without a doubt that there will be a disaster, but I can say that in my lifetime, I've never seen an oil field that didn't have some type of major incident at some time or another. Why take the chance if you don't have to? Dispersing agent. I told you I'd talk more about Corexit. This is the product right here. Corexit 9527A, owned by a company called Nalco. Nalco is owned by BP. Yeah. Corexit is a chemical that's removed from crude oil. In its natural state, this chemical is a part of that crude oil. It causes the oil to break down in nature. It causes it to weather into a completely inert product, to where you can take tar balls, real tar balls, you can hold it in your hand and it just sits there. You can take and put a lighter under it and it drips like candle wax, but it will not burn. Once you put this stuff in the oil, this is the chemical that's removed from the oil to make it viscous. It makes it stick to the steel parts in your engine. Without it, the oil breaks down. So we've got warehouses full of this very toxic solvent and nothing to do with it, right? It's outlawed in Europe. It's outlawed in England, where BP is from, but it's not outlawed in America, and it's the #1 listed response in New Zealand to an oil spill is dump Corexit on it. This stuff, when it's added back to the oil, it doesn't make it go away. It breaks it down and makes it sink to the bottom of the ocean, where it lays there in these huge tar mats that wash up on our beaches. We're still having oil wash up on our beaches today. This year, right now, 3 years later, we're still having oil wash up on our beaches in a very toxic form. Hurricane Ivan just hit the Barataria area, the town of Lafitte, Lafourche. All of these communities in there were coated, once again, on dry land. They were coated with this Corexit laced concoction, you know, this cocktail of disaster. How vivid the bright colors were in those early photographs I showed. Now look at it. It's purple. It's dense, but it's sinking below the surface. You don't see the rainbow anymore. It's going beneath the boom here. It can't be burned. This is what happens after the Corexit is added. It causes it to sink out of sight. That's all. It doesn't make it go away. Once it's in the water, it will evaporate into the clouds, and it will rain back down on us. When this happened, I had a nice garden. I love my fresh veggies. You know, who doesn't like fresh corn, fresh beans, fresh peas and all? My corn developed big black spots on the leaves. The ears were mealy-like. They didn't have that sweet, fresh taste of corn. We wouldn't even eat it. My beans, you couldn't snap them. They were like rubber. The whole garden failed that year. And this happened all along the southeastern United States. We lost a lot of crops that year. So imagine if this were to happen here, sheep farmers, your sheep have to eat the grass. The cows, they have to eat the grass that this stuff will eventually fall on. Everything becomes toxic at that point. In the Gulf of Mexico, we thought, well, I just want to eat the shrimp. I won't eat the fish and I'll be okay. But menhaden is one of the biggest cash crops in the Gulf of Mexico. It's a feedstock product. They feed it to our hogs. They feed it to the poultry industry. So when I carve my turkey on Thanksgiving Day, I'm eating Gulf of Mexico seafood, like it or not. And that was done to our entire country. People inland had no idea what was going on. This guy went swimming. We had signs all over our beach that said, don't go in the water. You may or may not see the oil, but if you do see oil, contact us. If you go swimming, take a shower, wash it off. Don't use harsh detergents because it'll cause even further absorption into the skin. This young man went swimming. He did exactly what they told him to do. He took a shower and then was brought out and put under an ultraviolet light. Corexit and oil, Corexit mixed with oil shows up under the ultraviolet light like these spots right here. So you see he's covered with this stuff. And that's the result. These lesions on that girl's leg were caused from going swimming in the Gulf of Mexico, although our doctors will never admit to that because of the insurance possibilities. BP has put millions and millions of dollars on many tables to make sure that the truth doesn't come out about this. This was one of many. We had hundreds of dolphins that died. In the first year, we had, I think there was like 160, 170 dolphins that washed up on our beaches. The next year, the ones that survived and were able to have babies, their children were weakened. The young from these dolphins were weakened to the point where some of them didn't make it. The next year, the third generation, which was predicted to us by Dr. Ricky Ott, a marine toxicologist who was in the Exxon Valdez disaster. She's been in Prince William Sound studying this since it happened. She told us, in 3 years' time, you'll see the decline of your fisheries. You'll see the death of some of these species completely. This is a fully matured dolphin. That's a baby. This is a woman's shoe, to give you an idea of the size. This dolphin was probably stillborn or died within just a short time after it was born. Now the count is up over 600 of these dolphins that have washed up on our shore. And it's getting more and more frequent that you find the young and stillborn. This is exactly what was predicted to us. So, you know, these are things that you can research on your own, but it's true. It's happening to us right now. That's a picture of the fish. This is a snapper with lesions that are very, very similar to the ones that I had, along with several others around the coast that had these lesions. I know a young man who was a perfectly healthy specimen of a United States Marine. He was in great physical condition. He went swimming in the Gulf of Mexico several times before he was going to ship out to go overseas, and he is now in a wheelchair. He has the same lesions in his brain. He goes through seizures at times that are so severe they have to stretch him out on the floor and people actually have to sit on him to keep him from convulsing and hurting himself. He was not sick before he went swimming in that Corexit. The prawn at the top, we call them shrimp, but these are cancerous tumors that are growing on the outside of that prawn. On the inside of its head, a lot of them are coming up with parasites inside the heads of these prawns. Also, if you notice, there's no eyes. Not where the eyes were pulled off in the nets. There's no eye sockets. They are mutants now of what they once were. Crabs with black lungs and holes in their shells. Imagine that in Kayakwara. Think about the kaimwana that's here, the seafood that comes out of these oceans with this coming in on it. You know, this is very, very dangerous business. That's a close-up of one of the snapper that was brought in. The lesions on that fish are pretty severe. I'm going to introduce you in this next slide to a young lady named Kendra Arneson. Kendra was not an environmental activist. She came from a fishing family that lives in one of the most southernmost cities in the United States. They were the closest to the disaster when it occurred. Her husband is a commercial fisherman. Her daughter is 9 years old. They're all having some extreme problems from this. And I want you to listen to what Kendra has to say. It's a heart-wrenching story, but it's one that I feel like you really ought to hear. Kendra Arneson.
Thank you. The official story is that no one is sick, the seafood is safe, the oil is gone, and everyone's been made whole. I personally have been fighting the skin infection since the end of May of 2010. I've been on several rounds of antibiotics, and now on a daily basis, I wash my skin with an antimicrobial soap. My husband and 9-year-old little girl have been ill every 4 to 6 weeks. David is my husband. He's been ill since May 2010. And Alina, my daughter, since September 2010. Along with a high fever and upper respiratory infections. My little girl is suffering with chest pains and breathing issues. As of April 2011, our elementary school only has 400 kids. We have a closet full of nebulizers. I'm sorry. With only 400 children in attendance at our school, many also have skin infections along with these breathing issues. Last month, I received 4 notices in 7 days of different skin infections with our kids. What is going on? I look at my children and I don't know what their future may be. My 6-year-old seems fine, but I have to wonder, am I going to be in a hospital in 6 or 7 years with my daughter with her hair falling out? I'm going to move on. The seafood safe? I'm not so sure. Fishermen have caught shrimp with their eyes, shrimp with larvae hatching inside their head. In deep water, fish of many different species have a black sludge in their stomach. The substance appears to be seeping into the meat of the fish. The oysters, from what I've heard, are not spatting as they should. Crabs are showing deformities. We have sent fresh samples to both NOAA and LSU, only to have them disappear. As most know, oil washes in on a daily basis. Most are unaware of the fresh oil our deep water fishermen pass through every day, only to be exposed again. Being made whole would be great if it were true or even possible. However, we have yet to be made whole, and we probably never will be. Our government has allowed BP to rob us of our health, our home, our fishery, our heritage, and our future. My family and I are going to have to move. I can stay here no longer.